I'd like to welcome you all and thank you for coming today and sharing in some Dharma with me. So lovely to be here. Firstly, I think we'll just settle in and have a couple of minutes of some quiet meditation. It helps to bring us together, to bring us present in this space. But I want that we... now I might have to get them to put that photo up, if you'd like. I want us to have our eyes just very lightly, not fully closed. We're not going into a deep state of bliss or a samadhi. But we're going into a present awareness, attentive awareness of where we are. In this hall, seated on a cushion or a chair. And just settling the mind. For those who are still chatting and a little restless, just bringing yourself into meditation. Just being aware of your body in the space that it is. Nothing else other than this body is seated on this cushion. Back is erect. And we're just relaxing, breathing very naturally. Not pushing anything away. Allowing whatever sights appear, or sounds, there's nowhere to go with our thoughts. There's nothing we have to do other than just be present, be here. All our intentions for the rest of the day will begin once we leave here. Allowing ourselves to enter into this moment, this place, this energy, with awareness, just of what is, nothing special. Every moment it changes, even if we're looking at the carpet. It's not the same view we had a moment ago. Just looking at filtered light through our semi-closed eyes. The light changes. Thoughts appearing in the mind. They come and go. You can't stop them. They will pass of their own. Sense of touch or feeling, experiences within the body. They have their conditions to be. The practice of this open, attentive awareness doesn't actually have a name. We've added things like mindfulness, concentration, focus, being here, whatever. It is what it is. The more we can come back to it in the day, the more it can grow in whatever it is we're doing, whether we're sitting, walking, laying down. The less we'll be distracted. Trying to get into states, or we're trying to create some effect or have some outcome of practice. We will never reach it. Reality, there's nothing really to be attained, and nothing to be rejected. It all enters from the same place and goes back to the same place. And however hard we try, in the trying, in the effort, we miss it. Okay, you may relax your body and stay attentive or continue and just listen. On the board there is a photograph I took the other day. Fortunately it wasn't one that I wanted to talk about actually, but the other was the night before. I had finished an afternoon of working outside and fencing, and feeling a little tired, I went to sit on one of my favourite logs and just ponder on the pond, or gaze into the forest behind it. This evening there was a very soft glow, somewhere about 5-6 o'clock in the evening. Soft glow coming through the forest over the pond. It was shimmering, reflective. And quite colourful actually, quite luminous. I noticed a little pile of path topping had come down in the rain and settled in one corner. Then my eyes were attracted to a movement, and a little red shape flashed up and disappeared into the darkness of the water. And then my eyes caught the transparent light coming through an iris leaf. The sunlight in the evening is quite soft, but it's quite penetrating. So it illuminates these things. And slowly as my mind settled and I entered into a deep quiet state with my eyes still, just poised in front, not on anything particular, perhaps the whole. I noticed that in that spacious awareness, how much we can see. Meditation of seeing is the capacity to not filter, not block anything out. And for it to become part of who we are in that moment, and for ourselves to become part of the scenery in all its very multifaceted shapes and form and colour and array of experiences that are happening. And I'll share a little bit more of this in light of some teaching that I'm studying, which goes into the infinite realms of being. It's called the Avatamsaka Sutta, or the Flower Garland Sutta, sometimes a flower ornament. It's a very large volume of text, 40 volumes, and an American man by the name of Thomas Cleary, he translated it many years ago. And I had the fortune to study it for 1 year when I was in Korea, living with the nuns. My teacher is an academic and scholar of this teaching and many others. So I went to study with her for a year. But I didn't really understand it then. However, I noticed, I experienced looking at the world differently. I experienced this sense of less need to identify or control. At that time, I had a much more appreciative and a more whole view of the many little facets of our life and what it is we're part of. The sutra, let's see if I can just find a couple of notes on it here. I probably won't. It speaks to all the deeds of the Buddha, all the actions, and the resulting merits of his actions are what is called the blossoms, or the garland, the flower garland. And in Mahayana Buddhism, they talk about infinite Buddhas, so to speak, infinite potential of Buddhas. And in each of these garland is a Buddha in the center, which means that the function of who we know and what we know about Shakyamuni Buddha is repeated in this infinite flower garland, infinite flowers, infinite Buddhas, all with these very enlightened actions. So you can imagine studying all of this over a year, how the mind expands. And it is really, the discourse begins in this atheism of bodhisattvas and enlightened beings who come to listen to the Buddha teaching about this sutra. And Robert Thurman, an American scholar who I'm studying with at the moment on this sutra, he chants part of it. And so today's talk is really more about the great value and use of chanting and memorizing and studying text in a way that illuminates the depth of a text through sound and through allowing what it is we hear from our own voice, or the teachings of others who teach in this way. It resonates very deeply and on a very subtle level within us to awaken a chord of resonance with that teaching. And so when I'm listening to Robert both inform and teach about this very complex sutra and explain many of the symbols and many of the great qualities that are expressed from the view of an enlightened perspective, it is as if I know it within myself on some level. There is some part of it who deeply understands the Dhamma, even though we don't necessarily believe it. But when we hear a truth, we know it. It's a very wonderful thing. So, I sit and listen, and then do some practice for a couple of hours. And there is the very last, in this 40 chapters of this book, the last chapter, the 39th chapter, is a journey by a young adept by the name of Sadhana. And he's wanting to go on and become enlightened. So he goes to Manjushri, which is the Bodhisattva of wisdom. So he goes to a great wise teacher and he says, how can I become enlightened? And Manjushri tells him, you need to find very wise, noble, good friends who can teach you the Dhamma and how they became enlightened. What brought them to emancipation and freedom? So he says, go out and seek these wonderful friends, these teachers. And don't be satisfied just there in listening, but take those teachings and repeat them in your heart. Memorize them, say them. And in that time, of course, everything wasn't said, it was chanted. From the time of the Buddha, before texts were written, everything was chanted. I mean, much of what I'm saying to this audience, you know this, but many young Buddhists now, young people wanting to learn meditation, they're very selective. I want to learn some insight. I want to get to understand mindfulness. They're taking a little piece out of the path, a technique, and it has great benefits. I'm not denying any of this. It has wonderful benefits. Just as chanting a mantra has wonderful benefits, it concentrates the mind and it penetrates very deeply. But it is not the whole path. It's not a full path. So the reason for sending Sadhana out is not to just learn one thing from a teacher. Go and see how others attained their wisdom and take it into your heart and practice it. So Sadhana goes out and he meets, his first teacher was called the Cloud of Virtue, a monk by the name of Cloud of Virtue. So the whole sutra, these very elaborate names, like my name is Jigwang, is the light of wisdom. If you add anything else to it, it might be the light of flowery wisdom or the light of wholesome wisdom, or, you can add infinite labels that reflect wisdom. And he relates to him what he knows is the conduct of a bodhisattva, that is one on the path to practice and become enlightened. Is that a bodhisattva will have reached a limit until, of course, they become fully emancipated. And in Mahayana Buddhism, that is to become a future Buddha in infinite years, maybe. But he said, even though you go and learn and you discern, there is a limitation. So I'll send you to the next teacher. And he sends him on, and Sadhana encounters 52 teachers in all. They're women, laymen, priests, beggars, kings and queens. And he learns about the sea from a fisherman, the nature of the sea. I've given talks on this. The wisdom of the ocean, the samadhi of the great ocean, or the great ocean samadhi, which is the infinite play of our interconnectedness, the non-dual, 12-link affiliation of all life. He learns from a doctor and about how he is so compassionate for the ill and how he treats the ill. A wealthy man teaches him about frugality and how he gives his wealth, uses his wealth in a wise and generous way. A monk teaches him how to attain peace through meditation. A disabled person taught him about patience and respect of this body, with limitations. He learns how to be simply happy from children, or from humble people, how to be content. He learns harmony from burning incense and seeing flower arrangements. So it's not just he's learning from sentient beings, but even from innate objects, such as the wisdom of incense. My teacher once did a picture. He did a sort of a figure, a Buddha-type figure, of the three nuns at that time, me and two of my nun sisters. And it actually, in a very, very simply, just an outline of our shape. And somehow the outlines actually looked like us. And then he had a little verse next to it. And my verse was, when you meditate, look at the burning incense, the ash of the incense, or the smoke of the incense as it burns. And that will teach you how to meditate. That was in the verse. By just observing that, it would help develop my meditation. And I've done this practice over many years. And from nature he observed how plants grow from a decaying tree, revealing the uncertainty of life and too its continuum. And so he has this journey that goes through until he comes to the last teacher, and he meets Maitreya Buddha, who is considered the future Buddha. And he says, whatever you learn, as it becomes your wisdom, your attainment of knowledge in that field, then you must use it to bring benefit to others. It must be used, not just for your own benefit, to alleviate the suffering of others and offer the merits of your attainment for their benefits to awaken. So this sutra has brought me back to doing some longer chants. And so I wanted to share, that with my chanting, as I have done various periods of chanting over the many years, particularly in Korea, where it became my focal practice. Often because I felt I needed some healing, or I needed to, move in a different way. But once I went, and I have said this story before, once I went up to a very high mountain in Korea, Soroksan, I think it is called, and there is a little temple. And in that temple, there's no Buddha. Just on the top of the mountain, there's a little temple, not a big temple at that time, a little temple with a big window, and there is a pagoda, beautiful pagoda. Inside there's Buddhist relics. So rather than attach to a form, outer form, attach your mind, your attention, your practice, your chanting to its essence. Relics are seen as the essence of the Buddha. Of course, we love to attach to the form of them, but actually they are talking about that awakening, that enlightened mind. And so while I was practicing, I had actually hurt my back quite seriously and had a small operation which was botched in the hospital in Korea and could barely walk. I was completely limping. I had no energy. They had damaged some of my disc, my sciatica, damaged the sciatica nerve. So I thought, well, I either go back to Australia or I will do some chanting practice. And I had deep belief that this is beneficial. And so I went, and there were two old sisters, old women who had spent their life going from temple to temple doing this chanting and bowing practices. They were quite elderly at the time, so they wouldn't be with us today. But they were somehow like two bodhisattvas, and they slept me between them, and they would take me up this hill, and then they said, just bow. And I had done a lot of bowing practice, but I couldn't at that time. Just bow a few bows. So more like the Theravada at first, Theravada bows, where I'd kneel down and bow. And then over the days and weeks, I started to bow properly. And along with the chanting, and when you're in a group chanting, the name of the Buddha and the preliminary chants and the beneficial chants for all beings, there is an energy there. And I felt very deeply energized and inspired. And I started to bow. And within about 2 weeks, I was bowing 3,000 bows a day. 3,000. From not being able to walk to bowing 3,000. And all my back, the skin peeled off my back. It was bright yellow. Now they had injected iodine through the old spinal taps, they used to call them, into my back, and they had mist. And of course the iodine went throughout my body and affected my body. And all the iodine was coming out, was being pushed out. And all the skin on my back peeled off and the iodine came out of my body from chanting. So firsthand I know the deep capacity for healing from chanting when you do it as a sincere practice. When you do it with the Buddha in your mind. So I'm going to show, before I go to these pictures, I want to share a poem. Now, it's not particularly a poem about these pictures, but it is a poem by a very famous Korean monk in the 1500s, 1552. He visits his home village and he writes this poem. But he was a very famous chanting and practitioner of ritual and chanting. His name was Hujong. He says, after 30 years, I've returned to my home village. My people have died, the homes have been destroyed, the village is neglected. The green mountains are silent, the spring skies darken. A single cry of the cockatoo comes faintly from afar. A row of boys and girls peer through a window pane. And a white-haired elderly couple of neighbours asked my name, my birth name, and as soon as they knew my birth name, tears flowed. The dark grey heavens are like the sea reflecting in the moonlight at midnight. Until 80 years, he was me. Now, after 80 years, I am he. And I'll come back to this poem in the light of what I'm talking about, because I'm actually reflecting on stories from way back. And I know that when I go back to Korea and I go and visit temples, they're not the same as my memory. I see people, they've got old like me, but I still remember them. And I go looking for people, chanting teachers or meditation teachers, and they're no longer here. And I think, is this a different country, a different place? I don't know this place anymore. I don't know these people anymore. Until I sit down to practice. And usually when I'm away, I do go and visit a chanting temple and do some prayers and chanting. I do go to temples and I meditate, and I do, like Sadhana, go and visit teachers to learn, be inspired. And often teachers that I've known, monks and nuns I've known, who are around my age, who are now the leaders of Buddhism in Korea. And to see how their wisdom has developed and how their path has developed and what I can learn from them. We can always learn from anybody and anything, but particularly those who have inspired us and continue to inspire. So I'm going to show a few texts because time runs away quite quickly. And these texts, the reason I bring them up, because they are among the oldest remnants of ritual and chanting texts in the world from different countries. They are free for use. It does say it's open domain and free for use, but I do thank whoever has put them up on YouTube, on the on the internet, and they come from one of the museums in England. So if you'd like to share the manuscript. Oh, it's me who does it. Yes, there we go. Unfortunately, I forgot to include the script of them. But anyway, I know, we have lost the Tibetan one, I think. Yes, we had lost the first one somewhere. There was a Tibetan script there. That's vanished. Doesn't matter. It's gone. But the first one was a Tibetan script. It was from about the 11th century. Many of them around they're actually between the 7th century, the oldest is Korean, and the 13th century, I think 1200s, so they're quite old. This one is a Thai script. As you can see, it is a celebration of some sort, but it is monks in discussion, probably chanting or in debate or in a study context. And my text did have a lot more. Now we have sort of somehow got this, doesn't matter too much, but We're missing quite a few. Oh, well, I may have uploaded the wrong one. There was another Khmer one which was very, very beautiful, and I did see the Khmer one put up there. Oh, what happened to these things? The Khmer one was a ritual that they did when somebody passes away. And it was very old. It was 8th century. And on where they took leaves and pressed the leaves together to make like a paper. And then they would paint on the paper. So that was very beautiful. This one is Japanese. And it's an Amitabha. Again, it is part of a book. And this one is from the 10th century. Quite common. They still sometimes appear. But these, as I say, are probably among the rarest remnants of very, very old texts because they are original in they're copies of, photographs of the original text. And Amitabha is a Pure Land, so many of the chanting temples have, in Korea, Japan, China, many of the chanting temples have a relationship with Amitabha. They practice what is called Pure Land Buddhism, so they chant the name of Amitabha, or they chant to the Bodhisattva of Compassion, Avalokiteshvara, or Kuan Yin. We say Kwansin Bosal in Korea. And these are developing the heart of compassion, the qualities of Amitabha, the Pure Land qualities, the pure, conscious, luminous qualities of compassion. And they also develop and I have talked about this many times, about the many hands of Avalokiteshvara, 1,000 hands and 1,000 eyes. And each of those hands has an object, a tool, that can help and benefit others. And in the practices, you visualize these different tools like beads or a book or, some other tool as part of chanting and as part of the ritual. Now, Tibetan manuscripts, it is here. The Tibetan manuscripts are often a ritual which includes the tantric Buddhist meditations, and so you visualize the pictures, you visualize what it is you're chanting, and they are to do with specific heavenly realms and the deities that are the enlightened qualities of that realm. And it does depend on the circumstances of people as to what they practice. In the Thai one that I just showed you, an extract from the Tripitaka, so it is actually, in that very first one, it's an extract from the Buddhist teachings on the Abhidhamma Pitaka, and it has apparently some Khmer script with it. So the manuscript is the Cambodian manuscript, which I don't have, which was a little bit later, actually. That was from the 18th century and from Siam. And it was, again, a meditation, a ritual of chanting and meditation that results in very, very deep states of samatha meditation. And it also offers a visualization of the decaying of a corpse. So that was one that you do for a death ritual. So they're often a depiction. When they're a picture, even though you might be chanting, you are visualizing these images. Now there's one here that has this one is called the 100-seated images of Amitabha. It is a prayer sheet. And it has, each of those images is a little stamp. They stamp on it, a separate stamp. And it has the 48 vows, the 48 practices, vows that you practice to be part of this this faith, or this the Pure Land, what they call the immeasurable light practices, the immeasurable infinite Pure Land practices. And then we have here a Dharani. Now, Dharanis are, and that's a little pagoda. A pagoda, again, it's Japanese. And these Dharanis were often printed onto a cloth, and then they're put up on a big scroll or a big screen. And the Dharanis, like I will mention at the end with the Korean, the oldest Korean text is a Dharani, Shimyo Janggo De Dharani, something we chanted over and over again. Shimyo Janggo De Dharani Namo Radhana Dharaya Nama. And then you get very fast as you go along, Shimyo Janggo De Dharani, you know, it becomes just a stream of sound. And it was something I used to practice 108 of these long chants, these Dharanis. And they are something that concentrates the mind and the body, you know, the whole body-mind becomes as one. And it's just sound, pure sound that enters on a very, very deep level. Because a Dharani has many syllables in one sound. Each of those tiny little syllables do something in the body and mind. Do something with your energy. And so anyone who has studied and practiced the Dharanis will know. And the mandala, the actual little pagoda, is, what did I have here? Oh no, I don't have it. I thought I had something else there. But the pagodas, you know, oh, that's right. This script, this Dharani came out of this pagoda. It was rolled up in that pagoda. And that pagoda, when they were repairing a temple, it was inside a Buddha. So the Buddha had been damaged. They had removed the Buddha inside. There's usually a little pagoda. There's texts of the Buddha, relics of the Buddha. And these little pagodas are may have 108 of them, may have 1,000 plus of them. They have texts in them. Yeah. And the Cambodian one I don't have, but this one is also interesting. So this one is the seated Amitabha, which is in, oh no, that's the other one that we had. Let me just come here. No, it must be this one. So this is 12th century. It's printed on a flat sheet. And these were quite popular. You know, they were often in homes in China, Korea, and later in Japan. And it is a meditation on the lotus on a throne. So it is the Buddha, you can see it's all a lotus imagery from right in the center, the Buddha seated on, Amitabha Buddha seated on a lotus. And then it goes out into so this is a heavenly realm. Again, it has, if I can see correctly, it has the 1,000 hands and the 1,000 eyes are on the outside. And so these are the palaces in the 4 directions of these heavens. So often with a mandala, that's a common image that they will have. And they will have special chants that go to each of the directions. In later time, this one's a woodblock print, but in later time they became a painting, you know, so you see all those very famous beautiful Tibetan mandala paintings. But this is very old. You know, if you go back to the 12th century, that is quite an old image. And this is another very interesting one, because this is these little drawings are a text for the illiterate. So they can see the little pictures and they know what it's saying. And so this is also this little sutra, which is a hymn book actually. It's one to chant by. Again, it is to the Bodhisattva of compassion, Avalokiteshvara. So as I said, a lot of the chanting in this way, even though we have chanting for Shakyamuni Buddha, we may have chanting for other Buddhas or infinite realms of teachers and Buddhas, still this is, this is Amitabha and Kwanzin Bosal are the main deities in this part of the world for chanting too. And of course, usually people chant because they want something. It's only when you've practiced a long time that you realize there's nothing out there you can get, You're not going to necessarily gain from something out there from the images, but it's something that comes in from within you and it comes out from your depth of understanding. And this provided a way for people, again, who couldn't read but still could gain merit. And you would see in Korea and other places in China paintings on the temples' walls. And again, that is so people who cannot read or cannot, they can not read words, but they cannot speak them, but they can see the images. So there's a lot of people in, 100 years ago or so who could not read and write. Now this is the oldest text ever found. So if you can imagine, this was written between 1680 and 704. And it suggests that there were also others prior that. They had woodblock. And they know it because they know this text was only written during the time of a very great Chinese queen, Empress Wu. So it was her text. When she passed on, it wasn't used anymore. So they know, when it was written. They know when in the temple it came from, when that temple was built. So it has to be part of that inauguration ceremony or soon after. So that was found in Korea in 1966. Possibly came from China, but they don't know. Because it is talking about Empress Wu. And it is her script. But at that time, China and Korea, the divisions weren't so obvious, Mongol and China and Korea. They had three main dynasties, you might say, or three main areas. The Goryeo, the Shilla, which is a big part of Korea, and the Goryeo later, or the Baekje. Baekje was earlier, Goryeo and then Shilla. And Shilla was the 8th century, the others were earlier. So they were already developing as a country, but hadn't fully. So the interrelationship between China would have been very great. So I just wanted to share these because the teachings, these practices of chanting and memorization for healing purpose, for awakening purpose, for realization on many levels have been there since the time of the Buddha. And they have inspired. It's through these teachings that went from India to China, from China to Korea, Korea to Japan, China to Vietnam, that have developed those traditions in those cultures. And for me, I find when I go and I do a chanting practice, or I do it for whatever purpose, healing, or just as I do daily, add extra chants at different times, that my meditation, my inspiration, my aspirations, my concentration, my devotion grows. it doesn't grow just from meditation. I mean, mind you, my very, very first experience of Buddhism, I can't say this completely because I did have probably my deepest and greatest experience after 3 days of meditating. So that was my greatest inspiration to continue to this day. But on the path we have many obstacles and hurdles. And recently, like many of you, this last few years has been difficult. I live on my own and I've noticed fewer people come or fewer people call, so I reach out where I can because I know others are suffering a lot too. And with the floods, recent floods, I've been calling people, and I know at least one of my friends, her house has been flooded in Castlemaine. Others I haven't heard back, so I'm wondering. And I haven't gone through such disasters, not flood disasters, fire disasters, gone through disaster. You know, after that I did a lot of chanting, not for my, even during the disaster I was chanting and offering water to the Buddha to save, at least, possibly save the village, the streets that were near me. And we only had 2 buildings burnt in that area, the only place in Kinglake. Buddha's power is very strong. And chanting can have a very great effect, much greater than we can imagine. So I hope, you know, people who are beginning on the path see and realize over time the benefits of other aspects of the Buddha's teachings beyond just mindfulness, just insight meditation. Because it's not so easy then to cultivate the energy or the aspiration to go more deeply on the path and to serve other benefits and benefit other beings. So we're coming up to that time. Might stop here. There's always a lot of things I would like to share. I have, when I'm studying something, I make sort of copious notes and touch on this and a little bit on that. And I mean, it's a subject in part you have heard before, but I wanted to share these very odd scripts and just to inform, you know, how old, how far it has gone since, how many people have seen these and studied them and reflected on them. So if there's anyone who has anything to ask, please, you're welcome to come and inquire. Going back to that very first picture of the pond, my pond, after my mind was settled and my body was a little more relaxed and less tired, I did start to do some chanting. When I chant outside, I often chant out in the gardens, and that is for the benefit of infinite beings, those I can see and know are there, and those I can't. You know, the beings in the water, in the water, in the forest, many of them just sitting around me in the earth. I remember when I used to do chanting at Wat Buddha Dharma in the first years that I was there, I'd go out in the forest and sit, and I would do some chanting, then I'd meditate. And when I'd come out of meditation, there'd be a snake in front of me, there'd be a lizard on this side, a goanna somewhere nearby. So he was attracting the nagas of the land to come and get a little bliss, a little peace. So when we do chant, we always benefit ourselves and others. Yes.
Just a question that occurred to me. So this chanting, does it go back to the Buddha's time? Did they used to do that like back when it was in Nepal or wherever it was? Does it have its history?
Well, in Nepal, yes.
Okay.
In Nepal, definitely. In the Buddhist time, no. In the Buddhist time, well, yes, in a way, because that's how they record the Buddhist teachings. You know, chants come from sutras, and then the sutras had specific teachings to heal specific states of ignorance within the mind. And from these teachings, then through the chanting, they were passed on over the centuries and through into cultures. It was they only started to write down the text quite some 100 years after the Buddha, 300 or 400 years after the Buddha. They started to write text. And first it was on the papra leaves and bark, and then it was they started to make paper.
So they were repeated over and over?
That's how they've learnt. Yes, they repeated and memorised. And still in Tibet, I just heard this the other day when I was listening to Robert Thurman's talk. He said in Tibet, the monks could memorise 500 pages, and with absolute perfect recall. Like if there was something wrong in a print, they would, in their memory, able to correct that. So that just tells you how much capacity our mind has to learn and develop, you know, this capacity of memory.
There is an online question, yes. Venerable. It is from Andreas, and it is, what is the practice of appropriate attention or yoniso manasikara for beginners? So it's a question of where to start with beginning.
Well, a little different from the talk in general, but you know, for meditation, you really have to start with a development of two things. One is a practice that's going to quieten the mind, and the other is to develop a concentration on an object of mind. In this case, in the chanting, I'm talking about sound as an object of mind, the use of the Buddha's words that are chanted as an object, as we did earlier in the morning when we started with the chanting and the refugees. So these are all something, whatever it is that we're doing in this moment, can become the object of mind. And then we focus on this to still them, bring the mind to one point. If it is to do with chanting and sound, or the wisdom of the text, the knowledge of the text, what the text means, then we can reflect on that, which is more a contemplative practice. But for many, they use the tool of breathing, or they use the tool of, you know, focusing their attention, their eyes on something, or listening to sound. So, you know, there's many texts on this, for beginners to have a look at. And I'd advise you go and talk to a teacher, somebody nearby, and get their instructions. Mm. Yes.
Thank you for your talk, Chikwan. I actually got a copy of the Avatamsaka this year and started to read it.
Very hard.
It's probably the most frustrating thing I've ever read.
It's because you're wanting to get to something.
That's what I found while I was reading it, because one of the things I found was it goes in excruciating detail
of these realms.
Yeah.
It goes into the point being, he's talking about all the various infinite groups of being who come to listen to the teachings of the Buddha. And there's this, like in this room, you know, I'm here, you're here. So he's detailing all these different beings. But actually, sometimes people jump that area, that beginning. It's the first part of the book, but it's actually very valuable. Don't try to Don't try to do too much with it. Just read it. If it's difficult to read, listen to Robert Thurman read it, or other teachers, you know. So Venerable Hengshu, there's a couple of monks from the realm of the 10,000 Buddhas in California. They study this, and they've studied it for 45 years, and they are teaching it just in small sections. But the being, I know when I first started what you're talking about, because it goes on for pages and pages, but you have to chant as if it's just you're chanting something that you don't know, you know, because it's the way he's expressing the names of all these beings, but actually they are linked. If you just did a meditation on a section, you will find that all those names are various qualities. So say they're talking about some pond or some piece of nature, particular nature spirits, or a tree or something. If you actually focus on these names and keep in mind what their realm is, you know, we're part of a human realm, but what their particular realm is, then you will actually gain a great insight into that realm, the qualities of that realm. And so don't try to go too fast, and don't try to do too much. I know it's very frustrating. I had to go through it, and everyone says the same. But some of them who just chanted.
Well, I put it down, and I haven't looked at it since. I felt that I haven't developed the patience enough to be able to read it.
No, it's because you're wanting something out of it.
And that was the other thing, was like I was flipping pages because I was trying to get something. And it was like something you mentioned earlier during the meditation is like when you're trying to get something, you're going to miss it.
That's one of 40 books you're going to have to read through. Yeah. I mean, have you got the big book, the 1,600 pages, and they're very small writing? Yeah, I've also got there was a series of 3 books with bigger writing and a little bit more in it, actually. And then he concentrated it down to this one book with 1,600 pages. If you're trying to get something, you know, you never get it. Because you think in that next chapter, you'll get all the real wisdom stuff. Yeah. You know, if you want to do that, listen to Robert Thurman's. There's some couple of free ones on YouTube. They're very insightful, but they're further down the line. Book, I don't know what it is, 31 or 2 or something, you know, far down the line. Even that, you'll be craving to get something if you're going in this mood, in this mind, because you'll never get anything that way. It's a prayer. So you basically, when you do a prayer, you know, it's not that you're necessarily praying to anything, but you're offering yourself to that prayer. So you're offering yourself to enter into that realm. It's called, one of the books is Entering into the Realm of Totality. So can you enter into a flower, the totality of a flower? No. We can look at a flower for weeks, and I've done it you look at that flower for 1 hour, people go crazy because they just keep seeing more and more and more into the flower. And it just gets, you know, oh, well, what is the flower then? So by doing this, you just allow yourself to swim in it, you might say. Robert Thurman says you've got to learn to swim in it. And then you start it will unfold your seeing in a way, you know, like sometimes Savorn people, they have particular ways of seeing and ways we can't, or they can sort out puzzles in ways that we can't. They see it. It will develop that seeing. Yeah. Rather than, it's not about getting, it's about learning to swim in it.
Yeah, I see that now.
Okay, good. You will get, by the way, you'll get the wisdom as it goes on. So I think we're up with time. There's no one. Yes. Everyone looks at their watch. But thank you everyone for staying with it and coming today. And I hope you have, for the rest of your day, it's a very wonderful day. The weather's warming up. And may you keep well and safe until we meet again. Thank you.
It is all to do with staircase that's coming up.